Hello, everyone. My name is Elisa Ewan, and I'm the Assistant Director of Alumni Relations at Teachers College. And I would love to thank everyone today for joining us for our Alumni Career Development webinar series featuring alumna Kelly Sonoa. The webinar series covers a range of career topics and includes speakers from a variety of backgrounds. This series is co-sponsored by TC Next and the Alumni Relations Office. You can find videos of past webinars on our website at www.tc.edu/alumni/career-webinars. Although many of us are staying at home right now, we are just so grateful to our alumni experts who have stepped forward to offer digital programs that will continue to bring the TC community together to learn, share, and connect with one another. Today, Kelly presents Women Rising, Advancement in the Workplace. Kelly Sonoa is the Senior Director of Learning and Development for Advancing Women Executives, also known as AW. Her work lives in the intersection of learning and leadership development and equity, inclusion, and diversity. She creates experiences for leaders to experiment and stretch. She is often asked to coach people at the dinner and conference table. As a Senior Director of Learning and Development for AW, she strives to create equity and economic growth in the workplace through interactive learning experiences, focused coaching, and activating a robust network of executives to connect and drive their careers forward. Her experiences stretches across sectors and industries. She has built and led new hired programs for cloud companies, designed leadership development programs at Bank of America Merrill Lynch, facilitated learning for veteran and emerging leaders at Delta, Deloitte, Citi, the New York Times, American Express, and more. Compelled to better understand how change affects people, teams, and workplaces, she earned her MA in Social Organizational Psychology from Teachers College, Columbia University. Before we begin our presentation, I just wanted to let you know that we will be having a few discussion questions. So when we get to those, please make sure to submit your questions in the chat box below. Also, we will be doing an activity during the presentation, so try to have a piece of paper and a pen or pencil nearby for that. If you have any audio or technical issues, please feel free to chat me directly in the chat box. And without further ado, here's Kelly.
Thank you, Elisa. I'm so thrilled to be here. And if anybody gets the chance to partner with Elisa, I highly recommend it. It's been such a treat to be working with TC again, specifically the Alumni Relations. And for those of you who don't know, TC Next was recently launched, and it's just a professional development and career services hub for all of us, both alum and current students, and all friends of TC. So check that out if you haven't. It's been so wonderful to be back in the mix with TC. So thank you, everyone, and delighted that so many of you have joined, both people that I know deeply and love dearly in my TC network, as well as those of you who I haven't had the chance to meet yet. But I will continue to drive you to the chat for that very reason. I see some of you are already connecting in this way. Not only do I want to see who you are, but I also want all of you to see who one another are. As you might know, TC has a vast alumni network of over 90,000 people, and those people are your people. They want to help see you rise. They want to see you advance. And so I personally have had tremendous good fortune working within my TC network, and I want this to be a place where you meet some people as well. So don't hesitate to connect with one another throughout the course of this through the chat. Like Lisa said, I'm Kelly Sonoa, and thank you so much for the kind introduction. What I often tell people is that people come to me seeking change, and I get to do that on the individual level and the organizational level. On the individual level, I coach executives all day, every day on how they want to advance and grow in their careers. And on the organizational level, I get to talk about really interesting things in terms of breaking down barriers for women to advance and grow in their careers. So over the course of the next 30 minutes or so, we get a chance to dive into this topic together. So again, I want to drive you to the chat. I'm going to be asking you questions through the chat. I know there's tremendous expertise on the call today, so please, if you agree with something, +1 it. If you disagree, put up a provocative question. The idea is that we're here in the spirit of learning, and I welcome the chance to connect with you through the chat. Let's begin. So, first and foremost, I want to know why you're here. What brings you to a conversation on women's advancement in the workplace today? What's driving you to this discussion today? Drop it in the chat. I want to just understand thematically how you're coming to this Zoom call today. Ooh, and only. That is a very typical feeling for a female, especially in a small company. Currently feel a bit stuck. I bet you if we could all see each other via video, there might be a show of hands. Will that stuck feeling? There's so much more to do, right? As we cite stats on the pay differential, no question, Wendy. Yep, understanding how we've come from, where we've come from and where we can see where we're going. Curiosity about what's happening for women, specifically in this crazy moment that we're all living in. Yeah, women's suffrage and so much more to go. I mean, what a historic night last night, seeing Hillary Clinton and Kamala on the same night. So much happening as it relates to an upcoming election. How you can transition from a junior role to a more substantive seat at the table. Fantastic question, Carolyn. We're certainly going to get at that a little bit. Tati, I love seeing you there all the way from London. A fresh view on this issue. So much has moved from gender issues. And yeah, there's a lot going on right now around intersectionality. And I'm particularly curious in both in terms of gender and race and the deep intersect there. And so for me to speak as a white woman versus how this experience translates for a Black woman or a person of color, absolutely. Feeling a bit silenced in the career, yep. International school would have a predominance of men and trailing spouses. Yep, we need help, absolutely. New grad student, thinking about job prospects and wanting to gain more insight into org psych roles, absolutely. Oh, this is so rich. I feel like we could talk for another 37,000 minutes, not just 37 minutes. Great. Well, I love seeing this. There's a lot of depth in the chat. I invite all of you to scroll through it. If in fact you see someone who's coming to the call for the same reasons you are, that is your entry point to reach out and tap into a TC relationship and get to know your fellow TC alum. It's a huge element in terms of women advancement that you have your network activated and cultivated, and we will get into that, but I invite you to know just right out of the gate, you have people in your corner in this chat. Reach out to one another, and hopefully we will tap into this topic a little bit more deeper so you're feeling more connected to it. So no question, we are here to think about women rising in the workplace. And I joke, in the next 30 minutes, we're gonna dismantle the patriarchy. We're gonna solve for gender parity, right? Of course, we're not gonna do that. But what we are gonna do is sort of check out the landscape and know what we're up against from a kind of stats perspective. We're going to look at the ways in which we can identify some of the barriers that are in front of us as women and allies of women and potentially other underrepresented groups, and how we can organizationally look at tactical ways in which to break those down. And then tapping into ourselves is probably the most powerful thing we can do in terms of women's advancement. There is a lot we can do as an individual to make sure our careers are thriving and growing that directly address breaking down some of these barriers in front of us. And then, like I've already signaled to all of you, activating and cultivating our relationships is so important, especially when we're an only, right? When we don't see ourselves at the table, it's so important that we make sure we go out and find ourselves and have these conversations as it relates to career. So let's begin. So the numbers, as you can imagine, if you were to Google gender parity, if you were to Google gender equity, you would come back with thousands and thousands of stats. The three that really drive some of my discussions on a daily basis are these three, right? Women currently hold only 6% of CEO positions in S&P 500 companies. That number becomes even more dismal when you look at Black women specifically and other women of color. Right? That's when we really get into dangerous territory around only. The reason this matters and this number is so staggering is that CEOs represent decision-making at the highest level, right? Both policy, the future of what work is going to look like, and very importantly, pay. So the reason we need more women at the top is because we need more decision makers at the top. And so this is one of the stats that really stings and is important. Unfortunately, in the last 15 years, it actually hasn't moved that much. It's moved some, but it needs to be moved more. And representation is a huge part of that. In 2019, Boards had at least, only 36% of boards had at least 3 women. Why does that matter? Because we know from the research that we need at least 3 people, 3 women, to create what's called critical mass. And especially for publicly traded companies, this is where we get into this information around better financial performance. We need more than an only, right? And these numbers in terms of financial performance only rise, right, when you get more intersected around gender, race, and the other multiple identities that people carry when they bring to work. When we only have white men at the table making decisions, oftentimes our policies, our practices, our processes support white men. Much of this is very unconscious, but it is the truth, and so that critical mass is elemental. And then finally, the stat that maybe some of us have seen, right, is that women will only apply for a job when they meet 100% of the job criteria, while our male counterparts will apply for a job at only that 60% mark. This ends up translating into some really interesting ways, in the sense that men are often hired on their potential, right? There's a gap there, but we see an opportunity for them to grow, whereas women are often hired and promoted based on their experience. As long as you have all of these things, then you are allowed to advance. And so for the sake of our conversation, we're going to dive into how we can organizationally look at these things and start to do some things organizationally to gain traction. For some of you who are expert in this space, it will be redundant. For those of you who aren't, I want you to think about it as a way to build some awareness around what you can do organizationally for those that you support and for your colleagues and peers as you think about the systemic reality of advancing women in the workplace. So I would love to know a little bit more about your experience, though. I've shared with you the barriers that I think are really critical when it comes to advancement of women in the workplace, but I'm curious about yours. What barriers to women rising in the workplace have you seen or experienced? I'm curious about your own lived experience. Oh, interesting comment there from Christine about having started a practice to help shepherd young women from college to their first career experience. Christine, I'd love to connect on that. I think that is fantastic work, right? And starting at within the ranks, making sure that we rise people up to the C-level. Yep. Yeah, Jane saying we're still seeing women's voices being discounted at meetings. Absolutely, this is quite common. In a virtual setting, we're seeing it even more. People being talked over and interrupted. Yeah, Emily says, constantly being judged by my experience versus my insight. And this is quite common too, right? Having to prove the fact that you've done it before versus I have the ability to adapt, adjust, learn, and grow based on the insight and perspective that I bring. Yeah, conscious and unconscious and second generation bias, no question, Wendy. Oh yeah, grappling with the consequences of maternity leave in women's careers, right? We make up over 50% of the working population. Generally speaking, we are the ones having children, and yet somehow we can't figure out this leave thing and grappling with that. And certainly other caregiving responsibilities. Yep, based on marginalization, based on how you enter, often we keep people where we meet them. And so what are the things we can do to make sure that that doesn't happen? Oh, Christine, I love the candor, right? That self-sabotage and self-doubt. If we could only turn down those inner critics. And there's some ways in which we can do that as we dive deeper into the discussion today. Yep, hired to lead, but only respected for cheerleading. Oh, Stephanie, I feel like we could talk about that for days, right? Katie says childcare, particularly now that people have kids at home and are working. Many of my friends have wondered how that impacts their careers long-term. And there's no question that it does. For those of you, again, a great term to Google is the she session, they're starting to call it. We are finding that in real time, women, and particularly women of color, are being disproportionately affected in this COVID pandemic. And that what can we do to make sure that we're supporting women on all fronts and making sure we are maintaining visibility and exposure as it relates to our careers. Yeah, absolutely. Sort of that discrimination based on which department, right? Less representation heading the more technical departments. Absolutely true. And so how do we find some of that equity and parity across departments? So again, right, your lived experiences connect directly to these statistical realities that we're facing as women and the people who support women in the workplace. Calling a light to it. I mean, even if we just stopped right now, this awareness around the topic is really critical. And so as you are in the seat of making decisions, of thinking about how you can push on these numbers, just this perspective can really gain traction in terms of women's advancement. I can't tell you how many times in a given day that I'm on phone calls with large groups of executive women, and at the end they take a collective sigh and just say, just knowing that other people are out there having this experience is enough for me to keep going. And so if you take nothing away, take away the fact that you actually have allies and advocates right in the chat with you. So let's dive in. What can we actually do organizationally? And I'm going to cover these 3 ways. Of course, there's a million ways in which we could go ahead and advance and break down these barriers. But first and foremost, I think one thing we can all participate in is hiring and reviews. As we learned, job descriptions, right, are places that right out of the gate, we might not be attracting and gathering female talent because they're not even applying. So if you're in a position where you're hiring, where you've been asked to talk about bringing on new talent, where you're bringing a new team member onto a team, or even for yourself as you're looking for a job description, review those job descriptions for bias and call it out before they're published, right? We need to put everything but the kitchen sink into these job descriptions? That in of itself, you're not going to attract the candidate. How can you build into your job description this idea that this is a place to grow, advance, learn? Breaking it down between preferred qualifications and required qualifications. And really, are those required qualifications elemental, especially when we're getting into topics of advanced degrees? Are there ways that people can have lived experience that are going to help our organization grow and flourish? Checking for hiring practices and processes. Coming out of a big investment bank like Bank of America, I was blown away by how embedded bias was into the hiring practices. You know, I'd have senior managing directors sometimes, their only qualifying criteria for hiring a trader was the fact that they played lacrosse. Now we know there's no correlational data between playing lacrosse and being able to trade across, you know, the commodities market. But that is some of the thinking that goes into hiring practices. And so where can we make sure that we have consistency across hiring and processes when it comes to bias? And then this one we can do for both our organizations and ourselves is considering performance review language. When you're talking about yourself and when you're talking about those around you, what kind of language are you using? Are you saying things like she cares for her clients, or are you saying she's driving relationships to convert into sales? Think about the ways in which you talk about yourself and think about the ways in which you talk about those that surround you to make sure the language signals leadership possibility. We've got some good stuff coming on over here in the chat. Awareness is a first step, says Wendy, right? Assessment and action are the next 2 phases. I like it. And we also have alliteration so we can remember those things, right? Awareness, assessment, and action, right? A lot of expertise over in the chat. Make sure you're looking at that as we go through. For those of you that are dropping questions too, we're going to have questions at the end as well. So please don't lose those rich questions. I want to make sure that we have time for that too. So don't think I'm not going to engage in that as well. Great. The next piece is around communication. What can you do organizationally from a communication standpoint? One of the easy tactics that works especially well in a virtual environment is this concept of amplification. For those of you who are familiar with the Obama administration, this might be a term that you're familiar with. And when he first came into office, right, deep commitment to diversity and inclusion as he was creating his cabinet and administration. However, at the end of the day, it did end up looking quite male. And not surprisingly, the women of the administration started to feel quite talked over. Their ideas were being taken, people were taking credit for their ideas. And so the women of the administration actually came together and decided that they were going to work with each other to support one another. And so when a topic came up and say, Kelly brought forth this idea or this suggestion, and it was immediately hijacked by, say, a well-meaning male colleague, and all of a sudden John has the floor for the next 15 minutes, we bring it back to Kelly. John, those are some really interesting points. I believe Kelly kicked that conversation off. Kelly had such an interesting idea. Let's get back to Kelly's point of view, John. Well, Obama quickly realized that this was happening and they gave it a name. It's called amplification. It works, I think, very well in a virtual setting. And so as soon as you hear someone being talked over, as soon as you see an idea being hijacked, that you very calmly and casually bring it back to the person who actually brought the initial idea forward. Amplification. The other thing we can do in a virtual environment is actually curate our meetings to make sure all voices are included. We can actually choreograph how we want some of this to go. If you're not hearing from everyone on your team, you're missing out on essential ideas that create disruption and innovation, especially in this moment where people do have really interesting ideas and can actually pull on all aspects of their career. So assigning roles in a meeting can be really interesting virtually, right? Oftentimes the leader just wants to be the facilitator, but it can be really powerful to assign facilitation to someone else so that the leader can actually speak, right? If you don't normally speak on meetings, how can you use the chat to drive conversation? Can you send out questions in advance? Can you send out questions afterwards? But finding those ways to include voices. And then most importantly, and this came out thematically in the chat as well, assessing opportunities for visibility and exposure right now. If you are feeling like you're not being seen, it is a time to get seen, and making sure that if there are meetings that you want to be a part of, you're asking to be a part of them, and then making sure for those around you who should be there, and making sure that you're creating visibility and exposure for those people as well. So women supporting women in this way so that we're not hidden during this time of extreme disruption as it relates to the pandemic. Just looking here over at the chat. And then finally, from an organizational standpoint, the sponsorship and allyship is really critical. And we're going to get into this more tactically when we think about how we can manage as individuals from a career development and advancement point of view. When you're in a position to champion women and other underrepresented groups, take it upon yourself to do it. No one is coming for us, right? We are the ones that we are waiting for. So champion those people, speak about them when they're not in the room. Women and other underrepresented groups, while mentorship is essential to career development, are over-mentored. Every single person wants to give a woman and an underrepresented person advice and kind of nostalgia about what they did or what they could do. What women need and what other underrepresented groups need is sponsorship and allyship, meaning I use my position of power to actually create access for other people. When there's an opportunity, I name a woman, hopefully a woman of color or a Black woman. I use my position to open those doors. I don't just hold it for myself. And when I'm thinking about my own vision and my own influence, I'm looking for talent specifically that is a woman of color, or Black woman, right? Women supporting women and using your power and your position to open those doors, right? As an ally, making sure that I'm active, that I'm educating myself around what is going on for women in the marketplace. And whether you are junior and emerging in your career or you are high level executive, it's your responsibility as an ally to go find this information, right? We don't necessarily, we want to make sure we're in action towards it. So I'm going to pause there and just acknowledge from an organizational level, these are some of the systemic barriers that are in place for women, and particularly women of color and Black women, right? This idea around hiring and reviews, these processes are inherently designed for people that are not women to rise. So make sure that you're acknowledging them and creating avenues for women to rise. From a communication standpoint, just by ways that we are socially normed as women, oftentimes we do get talked over and our ideas are taken credit for. Support the women around you to make sure that you amplify them and you're supporting them. And then finally, from a sponsorship and allyship point of view, if you have any access points to power, utilize those on behalf of other women and start to look for some of that cultural and organizational change that can happen through those tactical steps. All right, we've got some good stuff happening over here. Oh, fantastic, Wendy. She's happy to share an ebook on creating culture of inclusion, prioritizing cultural and systemic change to retain women and people of color. Would absolutely love for you to share that with the group. Any other resources people have, use them. There's a vast ecosystem. I'm relying on some research from Catalyst, which is another great organization that looks at the research specifically. And then I know a lot of you are in roles where you're actually at the forefront of creating cultural change around inclusion. So by all means, share resources with one another. Great videos on leanin.org, a really great report that they actually published, I think this week, specifically on Black women. I read it last night. It's wonderfully done. So take a look at that. It's all over LinkedIn this morning. Looking at these resources and educating yourself as an ally. All right, so we've looked at the organizational piece a little bit and some of the systemic realities. And like I said, you know, in 37 minutes, we're not going to break those down, but we can get pretty tactical. What I am really committed to as a coach and as someone who lives and breathes in this space is the fact that as individuals, there's a lot we can do. And it's really not even that difficult to do, but sometimes the things that are most basic aren't that easy, right? We're all working under enormous amounts of constraints, but there's some simple things you can do to make sure that you're going beyond just heads down doing the work. So we're going to tap into some real tactical ways on what you can do as an individual to make sure that you are driving your career in the name of your own advancement. And while you're doing that, you're hopefully breaking down some of those systemic barriers along the way. Okay? So what I love to call this is signaling. What are you signaling in terms of your own career? Now, we know that men naturally sort of do this. There's more of them in the workplace, and the research tells us that they do a lot of this, talking about what they want next. It's not uncommon when you talk to a male leader, they can very quickly name what it is they want next in their career. What I am arguing is that we adopt some of these same practices. As women, we have had to work harder and smarter and faster than a lot of our male counterparts. And so a lot of us, and I'm speaking generally here, are deeply committed to doing very good work. And I know a lot of you on the chat, and I know that you do incredibly good work. There's no question, and the work is table stakes. But the other part of advancement is what you're signaling. Who needs to know about the incredible work that you're doing? And so there's ways that which we can start to signal this work, and doing some inventory and auditing around our own accomplishments and our relationships can be a really tactical way in which to get unstuck. We need to let people know what we're up to, what we're good at, what we want, and what they can do to help us get there. We can't expect our managers, our mentors, or even our sponsors to just read our minds. We need to signal the things that we want and need in order for our careers to advance. So, as tricky as it is, decide what you want. I don't care if it means meeting up with a friend over a Zoom, coffee, or wine, talking about it, naming it, and putting a stake in the ground. I work with women all day, every day who don't want to do this, right? I kind of want to keep my options open. I'm really open to everything. I think there's a lot of ways in which we could go about this. I argue, pick something. You can always change your mind, but it's easier for people to help you advance if you know what you want. So decide what it is, name it, and start telling about it, because then people can actually help you advance and open those doors. Next, inventory everything you have ever done. And I mean everything. Start at the beginning. What are all the incredible things that you've done? Do not pull out your resume. Do not pull out your LinkedIn profile, but sit down, pen to paper, and acknowledge and inventory everything you've done. It is incredible what you have accomplished. And then it's our job to connect the dots and tell the story. And then finally, once you've done that, attach and name the skills, experience, insight, and point of view that you actually do have, right? When I led this project from A to B, when I went to college and paid for it myself, when I moved across the country to go pivot my career, name the skills, the expertise, the insight you gained and used in order to do that, and you start to develop this tremendous inventory of who you are and what you bring, which is unique to you and you alone. And those are the people we want to hire. We don't want to hire the people that sound like everybody else. So we're going to actually play with an exercise to do this relatively quickly. All right, everybody, if you haven't grabbed it, grab pen to paper, and we're just going to take the next 2 minutes only, to do some of this inventory. A lot of us who spend time with teams do this for our teams. We think about their accomplishments, we think about their goals, we make sure all of those around us have all of these things polished up and ready to go when it comes to performance management and performance review time. We don't give ourselves the same amount of care and quality time as it relates to inventorying who we are and what we bring. So we're just gonna do a quick exercise. Grab your pens and papers, put your fingers to your device, whatever's gonna work best for you. I'm actually gonna time you, and we're gonna do something called free writing. So when I call time, I'm gonna put a prompt up on the screen. and I'm gonna have you write for 10 seconds. And I just want you to laundry list all of it as we go through each prompt, okay? Force yourself to answer the question. Force yourself to get something down on paper. Do not open up your LinkedIn. Do not pull up your resume. I want you just from your gut, from your heart, to name some of these things, okay? I wish I had you on video because I'd have a thumbs up hopefully from everybody. But pen to paper, keys to keyboard, whatever it's gonna be, we're gonna actually feel what it feels like to kind of name some of these things from an inventory standpoint. Thank you, Katie Papazian from Michigan. All right, out of the gate, name your career and educational highlights. On your mark, get set, go. Hopefully you got one or two things down. All right, but the idea here is that you can recall fairly quickly some of your career and educational highlights. You should be able to do this, right? I'm not shooting you to death here, but you should be able to name these things, right? If we expect other people to know how incredible we are, we should be able to name that as well. We're gonna keep going. I'm gonna kind of hold you at 20 seconds each time. All right, we're gonna go again. Somebody else, give me a thumbs up. I need a little chat, a little love in the chat. Okay, number 2. Yay, says Bonnie. Thank you. All right. After each highlight that you've jotted down, jot in some skills and expertise that you used for that success, right? So for example, I went back to graduate school in my 30s. I moved from one part of the country to another, and I earned my MA at Teachers College. What are some of the skills that I used to make that pivot happen, right? I was strategic, I was agile, I was positive, I was optimistic. What were those things, okay? So after each highlight, list out the skills and expertise that you use to achieve that success. On your marks, get set, go. Now we're going fast and furious here, but I'm trying to explain to you an exercise very quickly that you can draw out in real time, right? So when you are thinking about how to create this inventory, you set a timer for yourself and you hold yourself to the 5 minutes that it's going to take you to write out what these things actually are, knowing that some of us are coming to this with 20 plus careers, right? But taking the time to actually do the inventory, putting a timer to it and not stopping to filter, to critique, to question. You just freely write about how incredible you are, right? We do this so naturally as little girls. I'm the daughter of I am a daughter, but I'm also the mother of a 5-year-old little girl. When I ask her what she's good at, I can't make her stop. She just keeps going, right? I know how to swim, I know how to run, I know how to bike, I know how to raise my voice, right? She doesn't stop. Somewhere along the way, we lose the ability to name what we're good at. And when we think about our own advancement, we have to think about being able to name it. All right. Next, I just want you to laundry list it, accomplishments and credentials. What is your educational level? What are some certifications that you hold? What research have you done? What writing, awards, and honors? How many languages do you speak? What are your volunteer commitments? And what speaking engagements have you done? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. 20 seconds. On your mark, get set, go. Often we forget these things, right? They live at the bottom of our resume. They're an afterthought maybe. The reality is these need to be front and center. You're constantly doing these things on any given day, right? Your education is shining through, your certifications, all the work you've done, the research that you're doing, the writing, the awards, honors, language. You are doing these things on any given day. I forget the fact that I studied abroad, right? But that informs who I am. I forget the fact that at one point in my life, I was quite proficient in the ability to speak Spanish. I don't use it every day anymore, so I've lost some of that. That doesn't mean that's not a part of my experience. Oftentimes we take a look at career versus job. And for women specifically, we see this a lot, right? We're so focused on the job that we forget about the more expansive career. And we're a part of all of those experiences. When you show up to that small company, that academic institution you work for, that corporation, or to that job search, it's very, very easy to get focused on the job versus the career. What are all of the things that I've done? What is the story that supports me and signals my readiness for what is next? We're going to close here with a quick round robin for this inventory, and this is important too. You need to be able to name these things so that you can speak about them freely and own some of your value. If we're trying to get others to see our value, we first need to own ours, right? What are you most proud of? 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, right? Be able to name it. What we're most proud of can actually be a signal to us of what we're very, very good at. Number 2, what would make you proud? 10 seconds. And finally, what is the one thing you can't help but do? All right, for me, it's introducing myself in a large room. Some of the people who know me well know that I can go around and kind of glad hand with the best of them, right? My best friend, when I'm at a school meeting, I'll say, oh, there she goes again. She's running for mayor. I can't help but introduce myself when I'm in a group of people. I love that connection. I love that idea of building community. Now, in a pandemic environment, that's a little bit tricky, but I'm working on it virtually. I want you to answer that for yourself in 10 seconds. What is it you can't help but do? All right, so just this exercise, just going through this inventory process in a more elongated way, I gave you a short and condensed version today, generating this inventory and knowing your value and getting ready to tell about it is elemental to career advancement for women. We need to come up and lift our heads up. It's not just about the work. It's not just about the output. It is about making it known and finding those people who need to know about you. All right, which leads me to this network activation and relationship cultivation piece. It is elemental that not only you know what you want and you know what it is that you bring in terms of value, it's then that is your network activated around this, and are you cultivating relationships that are going to help you rise? Tap into who you know to get known. Now for women, this can often feel like one more thing, right? Oh my God, I'm already doing everything, right? I'm already running this incredible empire. You're gonna tell me I have to go out and network a bit more, Kelly? No, I don't want you to do that. What I want you to do is be very, very efficient with the relationships that you have. I want you to audit the people you know and create a list of people and companies that you think are a fit based on some of that inventory work that you just did. And then get very intentional about your time and tapping into those relationships and making sure that when you are making asks, when you are signaling, when you are trying to get unstuck, that you can present a clear vision for people of what you want so that they in turn can use their power to open up doors for you. It's not necessarily about who you know, it's about who needs to know you and being very efficient with the relationships that you have. So in the chat, I just want to know from kind of thematic perspective, who do you know? Put it in buckets. We have I'll give you a starting point, right? You have the TC Alumni Network. That is someone that you know, and there's 90,000 of us, okay? Who else do you know? Put them in buckets and drop them in the chat. Who do you know? Drop it in the chat. Who do you know? What are the buckets? You've got a TC network. What else? Former colleagues. Thank you, Carolyn. Organizational contacts. Current colleagues, former leaders of the companies that I have worked for, absolutely, right? Your organizational development network, no question. Wendy, who else? Current clients. Clients are great people to network with, current and past. This often gets forgotten. Carolyn's exactly right. Family and friends, right? I'd never talk about, I wouldn't, that's personal. I don't want to cross. Let go of that. Your personal relationships are some of your most important career development and advancement relationships. High school and college circles, don't forget about them. They're very, very powerful circles. Former supervisors, colleagues, friends, and families. These buckets are really critical in terms of your network activation and relationship cultivation. Yeah, great example there in the chat, Emily, right? Through Emerson alumni and the TC alumni, she has friends who are making contacts for her and connecting with her, former clients. Right? Some of my family's network could be helpful if I had the shamelessness to reach them. And I say, that's absolutely true, Tati. Like, and a lot of us don't ask, but I will tell you, your male counterparts do ask. Your male counterparts do ask for those favors. And oftentimes the reason they're in the roles that they're in is because they make the ask. So I challenge you to continue to do that. And even when we as women, and particularly as Black women, make those asks, those doors still aren't being open. So let's make sure we are creating some of these relationships that we can. Really good point that Carolyn's making is that even the casual acquaintances matter. The power of the loose tie is really important as well. You don't need to be deeply connected with these people in order to make these asks. Yeah, Lindsay says, I've really noticed this lately. The men I work with have no problem asking. See what it feels like. Go out and test and experiment some of this. Okay, So again, a lot of expertise in the chat. And this one can be the most scary to do because it's reaching out, it's putting yourself out there, it's being vulnerable, it's staking a claim. However, get intentional and be specific. So very quickly, I just want you pen to paper to write down some of these buckets, right? Colleagues, current and former. Classmates, current and former. Mentors, current and former. Sponsors, which we're going to get into as we close. Friends and family, so critical. And then look up at the chat as well, right? Casual acquaintances, clients. Sometimes these loose ties are some of the most powerful ties we have. And when we have done the inventory to know what we want, to be able to name our value, we can say this hopefully a little bit easier to some of these relationships. But conduct a relationship audit, screenshot this, and go ahead and make sure you're keeping track of the people you already know, and they can help open doors and make connections to these other people. I don't expect you all to go out and build new networks, right? Use the one that you have and build and cultivate from it. All right, so quickly in the chat, I just want to know, what is the difference between a sponsor and an ally? What's the difference between these two things? We hear a lot of this right now as we get into deeper discussions around diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. What's the difference between these two things? Right? A sponsor is more senior, but may not always have your best interest in mind, whereas an ally can be lateral, will go to the mat for you. Right? A sponsor is generally speaking always more senior. They're quite influential, right? They have some decision-making authority over your career and where you can go, right? They might not, they should always have your best interest in mind. Sponsorship is a little bit tricky because the people sometimes who we think should be our sponsors aren't necessarily our sponsors. A lot of us think our managers should be our sponsors. They're not necessarily our sponsors sometimes. We need to find out who those people are, right? But absolutely, an ally can be lateral and really go to the mat for you, no question. Sponsors, that's someone who's further up the org and can advocate for you when you're not there. Absolutely. Sponsor can be more proactive. Yep, they're absolutely, you're in a reciprocal relationship with them. They tend to have, like I said, some authority when it comes to your career. And as Harriet points out, they use their power to move you up and your projects up, right? Sponsors and allies are critical to advancement for women and other underrepresented groups. Like I said before, mentorship as well. You always need mentors and you should develop those mentor relationships. In fact, there's some great webinars from TC discussions past around mentorship and how to cultivate them. I do believe that women are over-mentored. There's some really interesting research around this coming out of Harvard, right? We're willing to tell all of these groups how to behave and how to act, but are we actually willing to leverage our relationship and political capital to move them forward? So do some work with yourself. Once you've done that relationship audit, try to identify who the sponsors have been in your life and who they currently are. They influence decisions. Generally speaking, they are very senior and introduce you to senior leadership. They provide cover when you make some errors, right? Because they're interested in your development, right? They advocate for promotion and they reciprocate. The best way to find a sponsor is actually attach yourself to their work and show them that you have value for them, and they in turn then start opening doors for you. The sponsorship game is a bit of a longer game, but it's a necessary game when it comes to development and advancement for women. Allies are generally people who are part of that dominant or majority group. So in this conversation, an ally would be a man. That gets more interesting as you get into the other intersections around race and other identities. But you're looking for a member of that dominant or majority group. They're very committed to ending oppression and creating equality. They're taking action and educating themselves around different identities and experiences. So looking for those people in your organization as well and attaching yourselves to them is very important, right? You need these people to know you. You need them to know what you want, and they need to know about the incredible work that you're doing. So finding ways in which you can authentically attach to them and develop and cultivate those relationships can be very meaningful to women's advancement as you think about your own development and growth. Yep, great insight coming into the chat there as well. So the relationship cultivation piece, right, is very much around making sure that you can identify and advance the vision of the sponsor, like I just touched about briefly, and making sure that you're cultivating those relationships. Some of the ways you can do that is proposing solutions and connecting your work to their work. And we can talk a little bit more about that in the Q&A. So we've just gone through a lot of material. We're at the point where we actually can answer some questions, and I know many of you have dropped some of those into the chat and into the Q&A. I would just love to hear from you quickly. What is one thing you're kind of thinking about now as a result of this conversation, whether it's through the chat or some of the things I've said? What's one thing you will do or maybe think about a little bit differently as a result of some of the pieces we've walked through today? Drop it in the chat. I just want to see what's popping up for people as we head into the Q&A. Definitely the inventory piece, says Carolyn, right? A very thorough inventory. I love that. It reminds me that I need to do it myself. The inventory free write, I'll use that with students. Yeah, I think it's helpful to not filter ourselves, and it's a great way to shut down that inner critic, right? I am being told that I need to talk about how incredible I am for a few minutes. The reframing of who needs to know about us. Yep. The network inventory provokes some thoughts for me to take and work on. The loose tie piece, and I always mix these thought leaders up. Is it Marshall Goldsmith, or is it oh gosh, who's the other guy? Seth Godin. One of them has some great work on the loose tie bit. The rapid fire questions are great and demanding me to think deep, right? Owning what you know, owning the expertise that you bring as you look at the ways in which to advance. Great. And here's some of the key takeaways that we kind of looked at, as we went through. I'm going to pass it back to Elisa for some Q&A, so we have some time for that. And Elisa, I'll pass it to you. Oh yeah, great insight in the chat here too. Adam Grant has some really great research around these pieces too. And let's get into the questions.
Fantastic. And everyone, feel free to submit your questions for Kelly in the Q&A pane, which is located at the bottom of your screen. So Kelly, one of the first questions that we got actually kind of ties in with everyone's comments about the inventory, like listing all the skills, all the contacts, One of the things I know a lot of women have struggled with is like when we discuss our experience and our skills and our accomplishment, it feels or it can appear like we're bragging and just overconfident. How can we avoid or how can we spin it so it doesn't sound like we're just thinking about ourselves the entire time?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, I would say is to kind of push on yourself of what bragging actually is, right? The definition of bragging is more that you're trying to put that other person in their place and put that person down. That's a big divergence from confidence, which confidence is actually you trusting yourself and trusting your abilities. So if you can just come into it with that frame. The other thing that kind of gives me wings is that listen to some of your more dominant group members talk about their accomplishments. I'm not suggesting here that you act like a man, because women do get dinged differently than men do in the workplace, but listen to it, right? It's not really bragging. Oftentimes they will talk about what they do. Like I always make the joke, like men think it's a big deal that they come to work and do their job, right? And we don't, right? We just heads down, do the great work. Again, generally speaking here, right? But see I like to use that word of signal, right? You're not bragging, you're signaling. Who needs to know about your work? Now, especially in a work from home environment, right? I'm doing this incredible work all day, every day. And there's some days I look up and I'm like, no one actually sees this. How can I convey it? So a couple things you can do. You can forward those amazing emails that you get that you did an incredible job. You can do that for other women. You can kind of sneak it in, right? Like when someone announces that this was done, you can kind of follow up with, gosh, I love that project. The way my team did X, Y, and Z on it was really incredible, right? Kind of find ways to show your controversies versus just like, here's a deck. This is everything I did this year, right? So what are the ways throughout the year that you can infuse those things so it feels a little bit less like bragging?
Awesome. I love that you just you spin the word from bragging to signaling, because I think that's such an important distinction. So we have another question, Kelly. How do you change your voice from being one of opinion to one of persuasion and exerting influence, especially in those meeting sessions now that we're all virtual?
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I like to point out, and if we were live, I could kind of get at the nuance of this, but we talk about this a lot at my company, and this comes right out of Deborah Tannen's work around linguistical behavior. But this idea that one of the things that we as women often do is we'll ask more questions, right, in a meeting, and we think what we're doing is being collaborative or getting consensus or clarity, but what we're really doing is kind of giving up the floor, giving up the opportunity to make a point. And so she has this great little trick, right, where you actually put your expertise in front of a question. So, you know, we've been talking for the last several hours about this deep cultural change. You know, I've done this work for the last XYZ, you know, days, and this is what my group is finding. Here's some research that supports it. Here's where we've had some deep success. I'm suggesting we do A, B, and C, right? And then go into the question, right? So putting some of your expertise on the front of a question can be incredibly influential when that question actually comes. Versus when we just ask the question, we signal, right, that maybe we don't know the answer, even though what we're trying to do is get into some persuasion and influence and clarity. We also give up the floor, right? So that's a way to hold the floor. I don't know if that gets in there, but that's one of the things that popped into my brain that happens a lot.
That's fantastic. So kind of in the same vein, I mean, so we have one viewer who's a woman of color, and she typically finds herself being very quiet in meetings, especially when the room is just a majority of white men or women. And she just has this fear of like speaking out. Any tips about how to like remove this fear of being shut down in these settings?
Well, that is real, right? And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the only. So I would first call out everybody on the call. Know this. This is a very real thing when there's an only in the room, and it's actually the job of us in the room to make sure that this person's voice is being heard. So first and foremost, we can all try to change that. For the actual person, right, I would say I might pregame a little bit. I might, before those meetings, actually figure out who are the people in the room that are going to support me. And I might take that risk of, I really want to say something in this meeting. I actually have a point of view, and what I'm going to do is put that out there, right? You might go so far as to even talk to one of those white men or even women to say, you know, I'd really love your support on this idea. You know, when it does come up, are you willing to kind of advocate and support for me? In terms of removing the fear, I think sometimes we can do that when we tap into some of our champions. It's risky work, there's no question about it, but those are the two ways that I would go about it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I just want to be mindful of everyone's time, and I'm so sorry that we can't get to everyone's questions, but on the next slide, Kelly has graciously and generously provided her contact information. So if we weren't able to get to your question, or if you have some questions that you think of later on, feel free to send Kelly an email and connect with her on LinkedIn.
Yes, please do that. And I mean, and I know there's some more kind of nuanced questions coming in that are more kind of one-to-one, and I welcome those questions. And if I can't answer those questions, I certainly would put you in touch with people in my network who can answer those questions.
Fantastic. Kelly, first off, thank you so much for taking the time to share your expertise with the TC community. I know that all of us on this chat will be leaving the webinar and taking a very thorough inventory of all of our skills and education highlights and all that other fun stuff. Everyone, I just want to let you know that Teachers College will be planning more digital events in the near future. So please stay tuned to emails from Teachers College, Alumni Relations, and our social media channels. You will be receiving a link to this video presentation in a follow-up email, and you can find this video available on our website at www.tc.edu/alumni/career webinars. We hope you can join us for our next event, Building Financial Confidence, a virtual fireside chat with alumna Maya Moore-Erick and TC trustee Charles Desmond on Wednesday, September 9th at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.